A girl is running through the woods, being chased by something. She makes it to the mansion and locks the door after her, but it bursts open. She runs up the stairs to the second story to her bedroom and locks the door behind her. Someone is trying to open the door and is violently bashing on it. The girl stands there terrified. When she looks to her left and sees a girl in a white gown with hair covering her face, she screams and then wakes up as it was a bad nightmare. Her mother comforts her and asks for her to have a shower, but she says she will have one later. Her mother says okay, and then goes downstairs and looks through some items that she inherited from their ancestors. An old porcelain doll with a cracked face, and a letter written in 1817 by her ancestor Lucy Bell. She begins to read the letter. It is about a man warning about paranormal activity. Flashback to the 1800s. There is a ball on, and the Bell family attends. The daughter Betsy Bell tries to get her teacher to kiss her under the mistletoe, but her father John Bell disapproves of her behavior. Instead, they have a dance together. That night when they are in bed, the mother Lucy Bell hears some strange noises, like someone is moving around in the ceiling. She goes down to investigate, and gets a fright when John stands behind her. He heard the noises as well, and says it's too big to be squirrels. Lucy asks what it could be, and John jokes that it is probably the witch trying to keep him up, and Lucy hits him playfully, telling him to stop being silly. The next day at a local church, there is a small hearing going on between John Bell and Kathy Batts over a dispute about land. Kathy Batts tells the board members that John Bell stole her land, but John Bell said he offered her a loan of $100 in return for the use of the small piece of land, and Kathy interjects by saying it was a loan with a 20% interest. John defends his agreement by saying she shook on it, and he gave her 2 whole harvests to pay it back, but she didn't, so she forfeited her land. The board members question John on the 20% interest. John defends his position by saying that it seemed reasonable, considering her reputation. He means regarding her being rumored to be a witch. The board members talk amongst themselves, and then one of them says to John that he has broken church rules, and that such a high interest is usury, and that Kathy's land will be returned to her. Kathy asks about her timber, because John took it off her land and sold it. The board members say she wouldn't own the wood had it not been for the $100 loan. They appease Kathy by saying that she has her land back and the $100 and that the profit off the land was John Bell's, and then say that the loss of his good name is punishment enough. They end the court. Kathy storms towards the church exit, but then turns around to face John Bell and tells him that she has her own punishment for them. She warns John to appreciate his land and family's health and happiness while he can, because she swears that soon an immense darkness will fall upon him and his precious daughter Betsy. Everyone in the village feared Kathy Batts, and were all convinced that she was a witch, so the Bell family took her curse seriously. John Bell is out hunting with another man and his son John Jr. They see a deer and they all split off to hunt it. John Bell is alone when out of nowhere a wolf rushes at him and he shoots it, but there is nothing there. He again looks around and another wolf rushes at him. But when he opens his eyes there is no wolf, but his son is telling him they shot the deer. That night John's son calls him as they both hear a wolf growling outside their home. They go to investigate, and once outside they see a wolf run at them, and they shoot at it, which causes Lucy and Betsy to wake up suddenly. Betsy looks out of her window, and she can see the movement of a wolf-like creature outside, and she can hear it growling. It is so windy that her window doors are clanging and banging. She gets very scared, shuts her window, and then hides under the covers in her bed. The windows snap open, and she can hear the growling, which is now in her room. She is frozen with fear, but then slowly goes to look under her bed. Suddenly, her mother opens her door, asking what that bang was. Her mother can see her window wide open and goes to close it, but Betsy won't let her, saying there is something in her room. Her mother cannot find anything, then comforts her by telling her to come with her to find her brothers. Lucy and Betsy and her brothers slowly walk down the stairs, when a loud gunshot rings out and a hole is shot through the top glass pane above their front door. John Sr. and John Jr. walk through the front door. Later, Lucy is upset with John that they almost got shot, but John explains it was John Jr., that his gun went off accidentally. Still, Lucy is upset. Betsy decides to go back upstairs to bed. The next morning at school, Betsy's teacher asks her a question in the classroom session, but there is no response because she has fallen asleep at her desk. Her teacher looks at her in concern. He tells the rest of the class to go and get their 15 minutes of physical exercise, and he asks Betsy if she is okay. She tells him that she is really tired because her house makes a lot of strange noises at night and she can't sleep. She goes out to join her classmates. She chooses to swing on one of the tree swings. All of a sudden, as she is swinging, she notices there is a girl next to her on the swing wearing a bonnet. Betsy looks at her, trying to see her face. Slowly, the girl reaches out her hand to Betsy, and Betsy goes to hold it, but as she touches her hand, the girl's hand turns gray and zaps her, and she falls off the swing. A young boy and girl come to her aid, and she said it was from the girl swinging next to her, but the boy and girl are puzzled because there was no girl next to her, she was swinging alone. They tell her this, and she becomes so overwhelmed with fear and runs off. Her teacher watches her run off from the window of his classroom, looking worried for her. That night while Betsy is in bed, something pulls down her bed covers, uncovering her. Betsy pulls her blanket back up, but can hear someone in her room and also growling noises. Her bedroom door also opens and shuts on its own. She sees the impression of a body lying next to her, and then feels someone pulling her hair hard and it won't let go. Betsy screams and screams hysterically until her parents and her older brother run to her room. She tells her mother someone touched her, and her father asked who, and she said she didn't know because she couldn't see them. They then explained to her that she had a bad dream. As they are walking down the stairs, John tells Lucy that she wasn't dreaming, that earlier when he was outside, he saw someone on the roof. He tells her he thinks that Bats has sent one of her slaves to torment them, and when he catches him, he will beat him to an inch of his life. Lucy reacts in shock. As John is talking, she looks down and sees a clump of Betsy's hair on the floor and shows John. John becomes incensed with anger and runs outside to go to Bat's property to confront the slave he thinks it is that is tormenting Betsy. Lucy chases after him and tells him not to act rash and to calm down. John hugs his wife. John calls over his friend, who is a preacher in town, to read from the Bible and to say a prayer of protection over the family. At the dinner table, they all hold hands and repeat the prayer 3 times. Later, Lucy and Betsy go to bed, and John and the preacher stay up past midnight playing checkers. In Betsy's room, the thing returns, opens her door and goes to her bedside. Betsy wakes up, and the spirit or demon drags her by her hair along the floor. Betsy screams and screams, terrified. Lucy runs to her bedroom door, but it is locked. Then John and the preacher run upstairs and bust through her door to see her being held in the air and being slapped on the face by an invisible force. The preacher yells out for it to let her go in the name of Jesus Christ, and Betsy falls to the floor. Lucy rushes over to her daughter, holding her, and John Sr., John Jr., and the preacher all look in the area where the demon is. They can hear it breathing and moving around. It then grabs a feather pillow, ripping it open, and throws it across the room, sending feathers flying everywhere. Later, they all sit by the fire, absolutely speechless and shell-shocked by what they just witnessed. The next morning, the preacher, John Sr., and John Jr. go to talk to Betsy's teacher to tell him what they saw happen to Betsy last night. Betsy's teacher does not believe it at all, and tells them they are being tormented by someone and that it was dark and they didn't see someone holding Betsy. He offers to stay overnight at their house to prove that it's someone playing tricks on them. During class, Betsy falls asleep on her desk again. Her friend Joseph, who likes her, asks her to wake up, as they have planned to go to the lake before sunset. He grabs her arm and tries to lift her, but Betsy gets extremely angry and pushes Joseph and screams at him to leave her alone. He looks hurt and looks at the teacher, who just looks back at him. He walks out with her other friend. Later that day, Betsy is asleep on the bed and looks out of the window and sees Joseph kissing her friend under the tree, which greatly hurts her feelings. Then she walks over to the bed, where a book moves by itself, and shows her a page that says, "Remember." Betsy asks what she should remember, and then cuddles her doll and lays on the bed in the fetal position, feeling scared. That night, Betsy's teacher stays over and sits guard outside her room, just like he said he would. The mean spirit comes back and enters Betsy's room. Lucy comes up to check on Betsy. At the same time, the door is being opened by itself. She looks in and sees something invisible dragging Betsy's bed covers off. Betsy's teacher stands next to Lucy and they both see Betsy thrashing around, being held down by something, and then it pins both her arms and spreads her legs. Lucy goes to run in, but her teacher holds her back, telling her to keep quiet. John runs upstairs and tells them he will not stand by and watch. But as he goes to enter the room, her door slams in their face, and he can't get in for a few moments. Then it is able to be opened again, and they see Betsy fast asleep with the covers back on her. Downstairs, they all discuss it, but still her teacher denies it's a demonic visitation or something supernatural. Lucy gets increasingly irritated with the teacher's denials, when a Christian cross suddenly flies off the wall and gets launched across the living room. Then the preacher's Bible in his hand gets taken and thrown on the floor, with all the pages being ripped out. Suddenly, it dawns on the teacher that they are indeed dealing with something supernatural. He asks if the preacher was reading the Gospel of Matthew or Luke, and the evil spirit responds with a furniture moving sound to indicate no. Then he asks if he was reading a Psalm of David, and this time it responds differently. The teacher asks the evil spirit why it is here, and has the Bell family disturbed it, but it doesn't respond. John Bell becomes ill, and they check on him in his bed. Later, he gets up seemingly in pain, and looks in a small mirror at his tongue, which is full of blisters. His face turns gray and corpse-like in front of him, and he drops the mirror in horror. He looks in the big mirror to check his appearance, and he looks normal, but he sees Betsy in the mirror next to him, and she instantly changes into Lucy. The next morning, the staff are cleaning up the mess that was made by the evil spirit, and someone rings the doorbell. Zach appears at the door, one of Batts' slaves, and he tells the Bell's slave that Miss Batts found a bag on her property and it belongs to the Bells. She then tries to hand it to Lucy, but Lucy says she doesn't want anything from Batts in their house. She tells her that Batts said it belongs to the Bell family. John Jr. takes it from her, but then Lucy takes it off John and empties its contents onto the table. It is Betsy's bed sheets, with blood on them, and one of John Sr.'s shirts that have been missing a long time. Lucy asks everyone why Batts would have their clothes. Chloe, one of the slaves, eyes the other slave knowingly. Lucy begs her to tell her what she knows. Chloe doesn't want to speak, but finally says that because Batts is a witch, when a witch puts animal blood on someone's clothes or their items, it means that person is cursed. Lucy gasps and acts impulsively, grabbing the items off the table and heading for the fireplace, and tells everyone she will burn them. Chloe blocks Lucy in a panic, telling her she cannot do that because it will make it worse, it will let the devil in. At school, Betsy is smiling and watching her friends play soccer when she decides to walk in the woods. She comes across the ghost girl that was sitting next to her on the swings a few days earlier. She follows her into a cave-like area. The girl squats on the other side of a large puddle of water and splashes water towards her. Then she stops and walks over to Betsy and lifts her head. She has a gray face with black eyes. Betsy screams and screams in bed, and her friend is laying next to her, calming her, telling her she has had a bad dream. Her friend hugs her and asks what happened, but Betsy doesn't remember her nightmare and tells her friend she never remembers. Her friend asks if she should wake her parents, but Betsy says no, and she just wants her friend to stay here with her. Her friend comforts her and holds her, lying close to her, when they both hear a voice call Betsy's name. It keeps calling over and over, and they both stand holding each other in the room. Betsy becomes extremely sweaty, and her friend tries to get out of the room, but the windows shut on them and the candles melt down in seconds. A candlestick holder gets hurled at Betsy's friend. Later, Betsy is in a coma-like condition. Then, in front of everyone, she has a nightmare again, and her body twists and contorts. She falls off the bed, and her teacher holds her trying to talk to her. He holds her in his arms, and her eyes fly open, but only the whites show, and then her eyes turn back to normal. She sits up, being held by her teacher, and all the Bell family can hear a female voice call Betsy and then John Bell. Her teacher asks who it is, in an angry way, and then her father John Bell cannot tolerate anymore, and he goes to grab his musket gun. Then the spirit grabs Betsy by the ankles and drags her across the floor. Her teacher and the preacher try to reach out for her, but they are pushed back by an invisible force. They watch in horror as Betsy is dragged by her hair up the stairs as she screams in pain and horror. John Bell and Betsy's teacher are discussing the entity, and say that it only seems to be on his property, so they have an idea to take Betsy away somewhere else to see if that helps Betsy. Betsy's brother and her teacher drive the carriage away, and the entity knows Betsy is missing. It searches for her all over the house but cannot find her. Then it flies over the fields and catches up with the carriage. It flicks sand up in front of the horses to scare them, and causes strong winds which lift the carriage and flip it end to end. Betsy's brother and teacher go flying from the carriage, and the teacher goes back to the carriage to get Betsy out. He carries her over towards one of the horses, and then he sees Betsy's brother John Jr. get attacked by a black wolf. He quickly gets Betsy onto the back of the horse with him and they take off, with the wolf chasing them. As they gallop along, the black wolf leaps up at them, knocking them off the horse. When that happens, Betsy wakes up in bed with her mom looking at her full of concern. She tells her mom that she had a bad dream and thought she had sent her away, but her mom said she would never do that. Downstairs, John Sr. and Betsy's teacher discuss the entity and try to think of a way to escape it. Later in the night, Lucy approaches Betsy's teacher and asks him if he loves Betsy more than what a teacher normally would. He admits it to her, and Lucy suggests maybe he should love her and marry her, thinking it might save her. He is flattered by her faith in him, but he says he can't marry her just to be her protector. Lucy is sad but understands. After that night, Betsy's teacher notices something changes, that the attacks on Betsy become less violent, and the anger is focused more on her father John, and that the entity has left Betsy in an almost catatonic state. Lucy sits out the front on her porch when she sees something walking over that she can't see. She can see the weight coming down on the wooden planks, and then sees the entity sit down. The entity tells her she knows the truth, and gives her a vision of all Betsy's past attacks and some future ones. She opens her eyes. John walks to Bats's house and hands her a gun, and asks her to shoot him and end the curse for his family. Bats takes the gun and aims it at his forehead, and John closes his eyes expecting her to do it, but then she hands the gun back to him and tells him she didn't put any curse on him or his family, telling him he cursed himself. John goes to a clearing and plans to take his life. He holds the gun to his temple, pulls the trigger but nothing happens. No bullet is in the chamber. He goes to do it again with tears in his eyes, and still nothing happens. That night as Betsy sleeps, something pulls the covers up over her, and then a figure dressed all in black enters her room and she fights the figure. The person who is revealed is none other than her father John Bell. He had been coming to her during the night and abusing her, which caused her terrible nightmares and mental distress. The entity came because of the abuse and the negative energy. That night the guardian tells her to make him pay for what he did. As John is sleeping and is sick, his daughter gives him some liquid that he thinks is cough syrup. He passes away in front of his wife Lucy, who doesn't shed any tears because she realizes the truth of what he did. The female entity was trying to tell her all along. The bad entity never bothers Betsy again after that. Present day, the mother, who is the descendant of the Bell family, reads the letter and then thinks of how her own daughter has been having horrible nightmares. Her daughter comes in to tell her that her father is here to pick her up. She goes outside to see her daughter off, barely acknowledging her ex-partner. Her daughter gets in the car. As the mother goes back into the house, the spirit of Betsy appears to her with blood on her groin area on her dressing gown. Right then, her mother realizes what is happening with her daughter. Her daughter looks at her sadly as the car starts to drive off, and her mother runs after the car desperately to stop it. The end. Based on true events.